topic of this, overcoming the scarcity of resources. And this is really a topic that is around the whole core of Affiniscape today. Not that it has changed in the last 5 years. It hasn't really changed because this is what we've been trying to get associations to look at doing for a long time. But it seems the time is right now where they're actually paying attention and listening, or bigger ones have tried other things only to find that they're right back at the same table trying to solve the same problems. And it comes back to the scarcity of resources. Let me ask, how many, so we got home care here. I know Kathy's got a bunch of groups. What other groups do we have in here?
Texas Osteopathic.
Osteopathic.
Banking.
Banking. What are you with?
SAIS.
Okay.
Banking.
Banking.
American Society of Kansas.
Baking?
Montana.
Okay.
I saw them women together.
I agree.
You wouldn't let a guy in, so.
Education.
We're friendly.
Education.
Men friendly.
Human resources.
Okay, human resources. All right, so we got a good variety. We got a few trades, a few individual groups, but pretty much all of you, except for one, and I won't point you out, unfortunately, this is going to apply to all of you. More importantly, the ones of you that have peers in your space. American Banking, probably not as many peers in your space, but hopefully you'll be able to take some things away that you can find groups in your space. But it's all about sharing and collaborating and how we're going to help associations move forward in the future. So I like to say this session's about 2 heads are better than one. So I put a few quotes together so you can kind of see where we're headed. If 2 men on the same job agree all the time, then one is useless. If they disagree all the time, both are useless. That's one of my favorite ones right there.
Is that senior management meetings?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, I'm cutting out meetings in our company. So this meeting doesn't need to happen. This is a good one, though. Many ideas grow better when transplanted into another mind than the one where they sprang up. I mean, you find this, and I'm excited about it at Affiniscape because I have a lot of ideas every 2 seconds, and some of them I forget, but sometimes in the last year I've given them to Neil or given them to Baker or given them to some of our senior team that I didn't have a year ago, and I hear 2 weeks later that they've taken it and run with it, and it's gotten even better than what I thought it could be, whereas in the past that stuff didn't always happen as quick as I would like. If you have an apple and I have an apple, this one seems like it's for like a second grader, but it makes sense. If you have an apple and I have an apple and we exchange these apples, you and I will still have each one apple. But if you and I have an idea and we exchange an idea, we both have 2 ideas. That's a pretty good one too, isn't it? And the last one, coming together is the beginning, staying together is progress, and working together is success, Henry Ford. So again, I put these up here to get you in the right mindset. This is all about sharing and collaborating, kind of what we started the whole conference with the other day with Tim Sanders, talking about there's enough information to go around. And what I've seen in the past 10 years, 12 years plus of working with associations just at Affiniscape is I go to these executive conferences around the country, and the first one I went to was probably almost 9 years ago, and it was hotel and lodging and restaurant associations. And today they are failing at a higher rate than any state association you can think of because they do not work together. I mean, I gave up on them 3 years ago, and I flat out told them, I'm giving up on you guys because you're not working together. And I know where you're going to end up. And a number of them, I think 5 of them right off the top of my head that have gone out of business and either been acquired by one or the other. So either the restaurant association got merged with a hotel or the hotel went out of business and got merged with a restaurant. And they weren't listening. The egos were too big to really work together. So that's what we're going to try to help you figure out ways to stop. So if you've been in a lot of sessions, which you have the last couple of days, I think you've probably seen maybe this slide from Neil. But I'm showing it again because this is really the 4 areas that we focus in, because it is the areas you focus in. I mean, associations exist for one of these 4 reasons for the most part. And obviously a lot of you exist for all of these 4 reasons. But in the end, what we want to help accomplish is, whether it's 3 years down the road or 5 years down the road, we want to help you take care of all of these areas to say we own these areas for our space. And in order to own these areas in your space, right, most of you don't have the resources individually to do that. Right? I think you'd agree today that as a state organization, for the most part, you just don't have the manpower to control all these. Legislation, I'll tell you, you'll always control and you'll always own because nobody else wants to do it. And there's no money in it for for-profit America. There's money in it going the wrong direction for the most part. But all the other ones, there is money in, and when there's money in it, there's for-profits going after it. And that's basically the bottom line. You've seen this slide too, the association challenge. So what are the challenges you face in order to achieve basically domination in those areas? New generation of members. So you've obviously heard numerous sessions just in this conference about the generational differences and what they want and how they want it. I just watched a video a little bit ago, a comedian. Was anybody in this room when I just mentioned it in the last session? I can't remember the guy's name, Lewis Casey or something like that. Anybody know him? But he was talking about how impatient the young generation is. He said he saw a guy with a phone. He's like, push, come on, come on. He's like, Jesus, give it a second. It's got to go all the way to space and back. You know, give it some time. Talking about airplanes and internet and airplane. And he said, it's the newest thing I've ever seen. And I get on an airplane. They tell me you can log on and do whatever you want, watch videos. So I get on, and I think this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. And it's the newest thing I've ever seen. And 10 minutes later, it crashes. And they said, oh, we're sorry, the internet's down. The guy behind me goes, this is bullshit. And he says, buddy, how do you get that excited and so disappointed about something you just found out about 10 seconds ago? Just found out it existed 10 seconds ago. But that's kind of how this generation works, right? We want everything to go, go, go. Information services are pervasive and accessible. That means just what it means. I mean, you can go into Google and find anything. You can find any product you want in seconds. You can start a business and be worldwide in a week. You know, we couldn't do that 20 years ago. Niche solutions. I think this is the biggest one that affects associations, to be honest. In all those areas I just showed on that other slide. I mean, education, networking, jobs, careers, products and services. There are for-profits that do all of that in every one of your spaces today. Whereas in the mid-90s to prior to that, you owned it. I mean, you owned all those things. Generally lack key functions of a traditional business. I mean, traditional businesses have, you know, accounting, finance, sales, marketing, you know, all these different areas, technology. Most associations have a staff of 3. They can't cover all that stuff. And sales and marketing is the one that traditionally gets left out, right? Because they didn't have to have it again before the internet, but today they do. So it all boils down to this last part, and there's a perceived lack of value. And in the end, if you've attended any Neil's sessions, you might have seen his value chain where he said at the end, if they don't perceive value and they don't get value at the end, it doesn't matter what you're charging. I had a conversation with the psychology group the other day, and it was California, biggest state out there, biggest state psychological group there was, and I asked her why people were not renewing, and she said, well, it's the economy. It's the economy and affecting. I ended up turning her full circle and say, look, that's an excuse. The bottom line is if they don't perceive value, they're not paying for it. And she said, well, that's probably right. And I said, you know, I agree the economy gives people maybe less money to spend on things, but if you used to buy 10 things and now you can only buy 5, I told her, guess what? I said, you better be in the top 5. You better be perceived as being in the top 5, or they're not going to continue paying for it. So again, there's about 2 more slides that are duplicative if you've seen Neil's presentation, but they're so important, I want to start with them here. We've, again, been watching members and talking to associations now at Affiniscape for going into our 12th year. So I believe we have a pretty good understanding of what members want, what associations need, and how we can help them work together. But members want overall, if they join as a professional organization, but even if they participate in a trade organization, they're not going to participate if they don't, again, perceive value, but also if they don't have advantages. So they want products, they want services, obviously. They want content, they want industry-specific information. They want to feel like they're part of a community, whether they are able to learn and experience the more educated people in their space, some that have been in it a long time. But in the end, I think this is the most important one. And this is why people join your committees. This is why people participate on your board. They want to appear and they want to be more professional in their space. A lot of people want to be perceived as, hey, this guy's the expert. Maybe 20 years down the road, but I want to be the expert pharmacist. I want to be the expert occupational therapist. I want to be the expert psychologist. So they participate and they want to achieve an identity. This is, again, very important to especially that Gen Y. Right? They're participating in things, and the reason they get on Yelp and the reason they review everything under the sun is because they want to build an identity. They want to be the mayor of Foursquare, right? How many of you here do Foursquare? Nobody? I knew somebody would admit it, but the point is it's all about identity. And I think, anybody read Race for Relevance yet? Have you all read it? I mean, you should read it. It's a good book. You can't do everything it asks you to do right away, but this I thought was a great part of it. I remember when I read this, it was just resonated. You know, members like consumers, we don't want to go backwards, right? When you see something on any website today, and you see how advanced some of these organizations are in terms of delivering you value and relevance, you don't want to go to an organization and pay for it that is so far behind, right? And that's basically what this says. I mean, the Postal Service is probably going to be out of business in the next few years. It should be right now. I mean, $5 billion in losses, and they aren't going to lose less money next year. So how many of you go to the mailbox and get stuff that's actually relevant? Anybody? A bill? Bill's the only thing that's actually relevant that you get in the mail nowadays. So anyway, the competition is heating up and not going away. So in order to do this, I'm sorry, this one should have built right real quick. In order to do this stuff, we've got to start paying attention to all the things that we can do together to provide these types of services that the members want. Let me skip by this slide. All right, so, oh, wait a minute, I just skipped, that was a good slide. This was the one that was supposed to pop up. I got myself confused. All right, we'll just skip this. So associations, in order to provide that stuff, need to be these things. And you've heard this as well. I talked about it in the last session. You've got to be brokers of information. You've got to build information. You've got to be curators of information and relationships and connecting members. If you're in the last session, Russ was talking about their main purpose is to connect vendors with apartment owners. And that's really one of their primary missions in their organization. Facilitators of again, experts and maybe new students, mentors and mentees. Communicating. In the end, I think reporting, we talked about that as well. You've got to report on what you're doing so members know what you're doing. All right, so basically what I was saying is, God, touchy. If this is what they want, how are we going to deliver this stuff? How are you guys going to actually deliver all of these different things? And as we proceed through this session, some of the things are going to be very specific about what Affiniscape is doing. And in the session intro, it talked about these are things, these are totally new ideas. They don't really exist in associations today of what we're talking about here. And they are very industry specific. So I apologize in advance to some that may not get as much value out of it because you don't have peers that potentially might ring right in your head that I can collaborate with or that should be exactly like me, like home care or like occupational therapy or banking. But I think you'll still see some value. So what we have tried pushing and are starting to push more and more of is these industry committees. We have a concept called industry alliances. And the point is, today we have a very broad, very high-level perspective where associations are starting to talk to each other at least. And again, it's been a long process. It's been a 5-year process where at the beginning they're like, oh, no, we're just going to go do it ourselves. We're going to go spend the money one time and we'll be done with our software. Or we're going to go build this system one time. But we knew that wasn't going to solve the problem then, but you couldn't really convince somebody otherwise. So they went through the process, spent the money, they come back to the table. Now the second step of it is this. So we are now, let's just perceive these as all banking associations or all pharmacy associations. And you have all these different staff people that are working in different parts of the country really doing the exact same thing. I mean, whether they're accounting, right, or membership chair or director of education, whatever they are, they're doing effectively the same thing. They're serving the exact same market. They just happen to be in a different state. Right? We've seen this now for 12 years. That this is ridiculous. A lot of times they don't even know each other. They don't even know who's doing the exact same job as them. So we've started saying, all right, we're going to put them together. We're going to form these collaboration committees around topics, around industries. So if you are pharmacy associations, we're going to ask you to elect somebody potentially within your staff, but the whole group. Today, for example, we have 25 state pharmacy associations working with us, and the goal is that they end up, 25 is too many, right, to get anything done in a meeting. As you guys that have ever been in a meeting with 25 people know, you don't accomplish much. But if we can get 5 leaders to talk about just Members 360 and what it should do or what it doesn't do for a pharmacy association, we can get a lot of value out of that, getting them to collaborate around those types of things. So this is a process that Joy, who's standing in the doorway, and Austin, who you guys have met, will be instrumental in pushing this year for most everybody in this room because you all have industry groups. And it is so we can actually collaborate more closely and really dig into the issues and the problems and deliver what you need. So the successful start, and these are some areas that we know are very important. So I think, how many EDs are in the room? Just one? Well, you're kind of an ED, right? You manage some associations. The point is, and for the rest of you, it's not as important, but it is important, but it's not important that you be an ED. And see, there's stuff we do throughout the year that is critical that you participate in. We can't help all the groups if they don't participate in the things when we're trying to learn. We talked about at the very opening session where Kevin and I said, we want to be your staff, but if we don't know what's going on and we don't hear what's happening and you're not participating, we can't help as well as we can if you do participate. So we have events around the country. We certainly have, we attended industry executive sessions and seminars and conferences around the country. We have this conference that you guys are here. Thank you for attending, because I know you're learning a lot. The road shows, I know there's some in the room that have attended road shows because I've seen you there. But industry trainings and calls. So when Joy and Austin start pushing these, we want you to really be on them and give us your feedback and help us help you effectively. We're looking at a number of built-in sharing tools. We're actually going to create some tools that allow you to very quickly to collaborate with your peers in other states, ultimately right through Members 360. So if you have a better idea to run an accounting report, that you can hit a button and say share, and it only goes to those that are in your space that do the same job you do. So they're basically, you call them networking tools or community tools, but they are building those types of things. How many use Skype? Right, we're going to invest in, because we use it as a company, but we think it's a great tool for you guys to use, again, in the same context. So the communications directors of every state association have Skype available to them. And the free service is pretty good. If it ends up having to be a paid service, we'll figure that out. But the free service works well. But if they can collaborate very quickly and instantly on what they're doing every single day, we know there's a lot of power in that. Because remember at the beginning I said 2 heads is better than 1. Well, if we have 18 communications directors in the same industry, just in different states, being able to collaborate like that, you're going to see stuff happening fairly quickly. Everybody doesn't have to come up with every idea. And going back to what I said at the beginning, the biggest problem is lack of resource, lack of staff. I mean, you can boil down all of your problems in your associations, all the things you'd like to do, and I promise you it comes to one thing: I don't have enough people. Now, you can say I don't have enough money, but in the end you're going to get money to pay for people, right, to help you get more stuff done. So these are some of the things that are critical that you start participating in, and a lot of you do participate in, but we want everybody to next year. So let's get started here talking about, I've got 3 different areas we're going to talk about collaboration. And the first is around technology and data, because that, I know, to pretty much all of you in the room, is the most important part today. Right? You have to have Members 360 and 24/7 work the best way possible so you can actually do your jobs. And if anybody's seen this slide, you've seen me then, because I'm the one that has this one. But this is what it's like going it alone. Right? We present this to associations, say, you know, for 10 years you've been going it alone. How's it working? Right? It's tough. It's tough every day to handle all of these things when you have a staff of 3 or 4 or 5. And our average staff size is still 3. But we have a lot of 1-person staffs, a lot of no-person staffs. A lot of our HR groups have no paid staff. So how do we solve that? So again, back to the Industry Alliance. This is the concept of it. I'm going to whip through this fairly quickly. We basically start as Affiniscape, and as we started looking at associations and pulling them in, we found that they look the same, right? They're the same shape, the same size, but you can see they're different. They're doing things different. We'd asked ourselves, why are they doing things so differently? They're all pharmacy associations, and we could even see their data. Right? We were the only entity that probably saw 15 different ones, and saw their data because we implemented it. And our database guys would say, why are they doing this stuff completely different? Why are their event registration processes? This one's got 22 different levels. This one's only got 12. This one's got 18 due structures. This one has 27. And we started saying, well, either one of them is right or they're both wrong. So we got to figure out which one's which. So as we started looking at them, we said their needs should be identical. So we started digging into it a little bit further and said, all right, we know that our software doesn't do anything. If any of you have heard me at an executive conference, I said, I can promise you our software does not do everything. But I can also promise you no one else's does either. The difference is we're willing to tackle this 20% that after, it's usually about a 3-year cycle. How many of you have seen your peers, about every 3 years they switch software systems because one doesn't work the way they thought it would work. And sometimes they've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on that software. Right? But it's the 20% that drives you crazy enough to go figure out how to solve it, only to find out that the 80% in the new system's not as good as the old one. It's like, oh, now you got and you'll suffer through it for another 3 years until it irritates you to the point where you go look again. So our goal is to get the collaboration started to tackle the 20%, so that in 3 years you have a complete solution that continues to progress one industry at a time. So as we've started, again, pulling groups together, this is kind of the concept. And in the end, they effectively start looking alike, at least in terms of their business practices, their internal processes, their data sets, the field values. All these things start to become consistent. And I like to tell groups, and I'll stop here for a second, I get pretty excited about this stuff because I know it will work. I'm 100% convinced now because we've tested it, we've tried it. But I know it sounds, when I talk about it, it sounds easy. It's not going to be easy because I think it's easier today than it would have been 3 or 4 years ago because more people are starting to accept the fact that we got to do something different. Right? We have to try something different because just spending $1 million on software doesn't solve the problem. And that has actually benefited us from saying the same message over and over. So today, 5 or more associations in the same industry to us constitute an alliance, although we're working with groups that have less, but we really want 5 different opinions, right? And as we kind of get those ideas from associations, we've had lots of calls over the years where this is how we do it, and this is how it needs to be done. And if you do it this way, all of my peers do it the exact same way. Well, we don't believe that anymore because we made that mistake a number of times. We built something where someone said, if you do this, all of my buddies use the same thing. And as soon as we signed the second group, they said, who did that? I said, well, that was your friend over in Arizona. Well, we don't do it that way. So we made that mistake probably multiple times. Jeremy did back there. He's the one building all the stuff. But so today, it takes a little longer up front, but once it happens and once the rhythm gets going, everybody actually works together. So the head of 360 collaboration, that's Joy again. So Joy's responsibility is to work with that group to start figuring out what are the issues, what are the problems. Does everybody have this issue, or is it just one group? If it's just one group, how are the others solving that problem? I mean, and I'll show the next slide, kind of walk through that. But as we determine what an idea is, this is kind of just the cycle that it goes around with Affiniscape. But the alliance is more than just the software, as you'll see here in a second. There's, as Kevin said the other day, we are you, we are your staff. So we look at this as ultimately having all of these different individuals that have tremendous knowledge about a specific industry. So there are people on our staff, and home care has been with us from day one. You guys certainly. I think you guys are our number 2 customer, actually. You are our second client ever because of Steve. But the point is, we've learned a lot about home care over the years. Joy knows a ton about home care and how they work. But we want to get to the point where Quinn and her staff are training 22 home care associations at the same time, not a mix match of a bunch of different ones. When someone asks a question, it's not relevant because they're a trade versus a professional, or they're, and we're moving into that motion so we can actually end up having 10 or 15 people in our staff that understand what you guys do every day. So as I was talking about, here's kind of the enhancement cycle and what Joy's responsibility is moving forward as we walk through to get you guys to collaborate. Somebody inevitably calls and said, this doesn't work for me. And there's a few here at this conference actually have said, this is not working for us. We say, okay, well, we have 4 or 5 others in the industry. Let's see what they're doing. Let's ask them what they're doing. And then if they're not having the same issue or they don't do the same process, we also have a knowledge of another 1,200 associations using Members 360 that Joy and Austin are very in tune with. So we see if we can solve the problem that way. And a lot of times, I mean, Joy, what would you say? It's a good 50 to 70% of the time. I mean, there's a solution out there. It's just it's a change in process that someone has figured out to do it better. Now, we would never ask somebody to change a process that makes it worse. I mean, those are called workarounds, but we don't intend those to be permanent. So I know you guys love that term workaround, right? And then again, this process will walk through the industry committee and then determine what that best practice is. We want a single best practice. I can't build software to satisfy 5 different associations for the same piece of functionality. I'd say that's custom software and it costs a lot more money. But we know we can solve the problems by getting a single best practice process, and I think everybody ends up actually better. Get the product team involved. You've met Neil and Samantha and Brad, and they really want to deliver. And I think, like I said, over the past 6 months, they really have delivered, and I think we're just kind of on the cusp of really starting to roll. The engineering team is cranking stuff out and doing a great job. Determine the timeline and then deliver. So that's that cycle. You saw the idea go around, it gets delivered back in the product, and you're off and running. And then we continue to do the same thing over and over again as you run into problems by industry. So in the end, you look more like this. A bunch of people working under the same system around these different areas of your association and collaborating on a daily basis. So now let's get into the meat of this. So that gives you kind of an overview of what Affiniscape is doing moving forward. But I'm going to show you specific things we're going to ask you guys to do this year if you're in one of those industries, and things that I think will make all of our services more powerful. I mean, a number of you in the room, we manage your job boards. We're starting to do the news flashes. You've seen those services. Well, this kind of stuff makes all of them more valuable, and if you keep in your head that we work for you, whether we're selling, whether we're marketing, whether we're developing technology, this stuff is important. So today, you all have your separate sets of data, right? You have your Minnesota Home Care database has your members in it, and Oklahoma has their data. But in essence, they're all in our database. They're all in one big database. Today, here's what your data sets look like. So here's 5 fields, and if you look at those 3 different ones of association 1, 2, and 3, they're basically the exact same fields. They're just called something different, and the values are probably different. So member type is the same as membership and type of member. I mean, it means the exact same thing, but they're in different order, they're in different places, the values are different. We see this very, very clearly because we can literally run a report of every association in a single industry and see that 90% of their fields are the same, but they're different. So that means they're just different. They mean the same thing effectively to them, like member type. If you have, student member and regular member and agency member like that. Another one has type of membership, but the field's not the same field in our database. It's field number 20, yours is field number 3. So you can't build reports around that stuff on a consistent basis. So we say if we can create a single set of data, work with the associations to determine what should it be, what's the best format for all users, when it may be front-end and back-end users, because if you have consumer searches or member directories, what's the best terminology to use for that field? And then what are the best values of that field? And come up with a single set. What happens is you'll find, one, you have a lot more efficient data. Your data is going to be clean. It's going to be a lot easier to use and better to understand. The reports that we can build. Reporting is one of the key, I call it a deficiency of our system, because we have to make it so complex to give every association we have the ability to run these reports, because all of their fields are spread apart. If anybody's ever used a report generator, like in Salesforce, they're fairly complex if they're completely flexible, right? And we could do that, but I honestly believe, and I think most of our staff does today, that 80+% of our clients won't be able to use them because they're too complex. But they have to be that complex today, the way the data is set up, where it's free for all. You call it whatever you want, put whatever value you want in there, it's kind of your deal. But to report on that stuff is very, very difficult. So we said, if we can create consistent fields, we can probably generate reports overnight by industry. Very, very powerful reports, because the data is now exactly the same across the board. Staff collaboration, again, I think this one is one that is a big, big intangible, because it's already happening in pharmacies, probably the most advanced industry because of the professional development tools that we built for them. But they're starting to work together, and I think if you have the same data fields, the same data sets, you'll see your different staff people, as we kind of force them to meet each other and be introduced and give them the Skype tools and things I was talking about before. You're going to see they're able to collaborate in real time, but they're not, they're not, again, I'll use an example of the executive meetings because I've been going to them for 10 years. They hear lots of great ideas, right? When you go to the banker meetings, you hear lots of great ideas, don't you?
Staff hates them when I come back.
Yeah, when you go home and say, oh, how are we going to do this? Or you sit back there. I used to joke, because it was usually the Californias and Texases and Floridas and New Yorks that would be up there speaking about all the cool stuff they're doing. Well, the other 45 states plus were not even listening, because they don't have the money they have, so they're just ignoring it completely. And then I used to joke, I said, even the 3 that weren't talking, right, aren't listening either, because they've already done something different. So they get all these great ideas, and they say, well, I can't do that, I don't have the money, I can't do that, I don't have the staff, I can't do that, I don't use that software, I can't do that, for all these reasons. And we're trying to say it's a big job to try to fix that, but we think this is a start. This will start fixing that. Where now you can go back, and someone comes up with an idea, you can implement it the same day and not spend an extra penny. Right? Even custom reports that a staff might. So obviously, staff efficiency. Increasing automation, what I mean there is from the marketing side. Being able to market things based on a certain data set and a certain data field. And over here on the other side, you'll see matching, being able to automate and deliver relevant content, being able to automate and match people. So as I talk here in a little bit about our community platform, our idea, as we've watched, again, associations all over the country, 5 years ago it was probably about 5 years ago when Facebook started, we got all excited saying, wow, this is exactly what our clients are. We ought to be able to do this with our associations, and we almost acquired a community platform, and it would have put us out of business. And we were so close, and I finally stopped and said, wait a minute, they're not even ready for this stuff. If we take our eye off the ball and start focusing on this, it's going to kill us, and it would have killed us. And here we are 5 years later, and while state associations, how many of you have tried to launch, other than a Facebook or LinkedIn, how many have went out and bought software, whether it was Higher Logics or MemberFuse or the Port or Socius? Anybody bought any of those products? Good. Because I honestly believe, and again, I'm certainly not a pessimist, that they don't work at the state level, because I've seen them fail over and over. And in fact, that right now I cannot think of a state organization that has been successful implementing a third-party networking platform. And I think as we dug into it and tried to figure out why is that, and I think, and if you saw Neil's presentation where he separated social networking and social media, if you guys see that, I thought that was brilliant when he put it, and it was like a light bulb. I said, you're exactly right. You can't network, which is a verb, around nothing, right? If you do that, you get what we all saw and still see sometimes on Facebook and Twitter, a lot of useless, irrelevant information. And it turned off so many members when they first tried to launch those things that, you know, the other ones just didn't participate. I mean, I remember pulling up a whole feed on a Facebook page for osteopathic medical, actually, at one of the meetings in Chicago. And the 20 posts, we read 20 posts, not a single one of them had any relevance whatsoever to the space. It was like, hey, glad to see you at the meeting last week. Or where I can't imagine, you know, hundreds of DO medical professionals taking a look at that and saying, that's good information. But again, being able to match, our concept is we're going to you know, match people across the country. It doesn't matter if they're in Minnesota or Oregon or Iowa. If they're professionals and they're interested in the same thing, having the same type of data will allow us to do that. It won't allow us to do it otherwise. Right? We can't help match people. We have to match them only in the same state. And I think the reason in-state doesn't work is, one, they either all know each other already, which is part of it, or it's just too small of a data set. And I think it's both of them in a lot of cases. Increased knowledge, value, revenue. So I'll give you an example of revenue. In pharmacy was the first group we launched for that news flash, and I know you guys have, I think, have seen that today. We're going to be launching more industries, but today we have 25 or 26 states. We email probably 80,000 pharmacists twice a week, a news flash, and the advertisers ask us, well, how many of those are independent pharmacists? How many of those are health system pharmacists? How many of them have a certification in nuclear pharmacy? We can't answer it unless we go into all 27 individually. Half of them probably don't even collect the data, right? But it diminishes the value of that service. If we could have told that individual right there out of 80,000, 42,000 are independent pharmacists, they'd have probably gone through the roof. Holy cow, I can reach 42,000 independent pharmacists, but we can't tell them. So we're working with pharmacy to create this type of system where now we can pull it. We can't generate more money and more value for them if we don't have that data. So in the end, it becomes what we call our federated alliance database. We're not using the data for anything other than what our associations have hired us to do.
So
but
would you guys be formatting it a certain way that fits within our industry?
Yeah, but go back that.
Launch it out to everybody so that they can have the same format of everything.
Yeah.
Is that what you're doing?
Yeah, effectively, we're going to work with you guys around that committee that I showed at the beginning to figure out what is that data set. And we can run a very quick report, and Joy's going to start doing this, running all the home care groups side by side in an Excel file and start mapping them and seeing which ones at least appear to us to be the same field, right? And then pulling you guys in to say, okay, are they the same field? If they're not the same field, do you use them? Do we need them? What should they be called? And in the end, we know in a short amount of time, we'll end up with and I say we, the industry and us, end up with a single set of data that makes the most sense to everybody, that then you can start building upon. You still have the ability to do whatever custom fields you want in your state, but we know there's a core set of data for every single industry that should be the same.
And then would everybody within that industry be able to access that data, or only
Yeah,
you guys?
no, it'll be your data set. So that you use 360 today, those data fields preferably would change, right, to the data set that you guys determine is the core data set. So there'll be some changes there, and we'll go back and help re-implement that stuff. That's the thought.
I'm just wondering how that
I told you,
works.
it's a big job.
I'm just wondering how it works, just because based on each state, don't they have different regulations and stuff like that?
Some of them
So they're
do.
all gonna be a little different.
That's what I said. Some of them do. There is a data set that's going to be exactly the same, and I would bet the whole company on it. But there are data fields that you need in Minnesota that Oregon doesn't need, and you can still do that. You still have complete flexibility in 360 to add whatever fields you want. Yeah. So there still won't be any limitations. We're just going to change the names of the fields, right, to mean the same thing they already mean, but come up with a single set across all 50 state home care associations in your case. Does that make sense? Perfect timing, wasn't it? I hear this all the time. I mean, every meeting, wow, we were really unique. I just heard it in banking, last couple weeks ago when I was out there. I just heard it in pharmacy. Last week we had biomedical and school administrators here. I heard it at both receptions. Well, we're just unique. I said, I heard it over and over again. I know you are in some ways, but in a lot of ways you don't have to be. And it's all about figuring out which ways you don't have to be and trying to leverage those areas. These are just some areas, right? Member types. Registration process, I said before. We see the end result is exactly the same thing. You get people to join an organization. Why does one have 20 different dues levels? And when you ask them, they say, well, that's just how it's always been. I mean, I don't know how many times we've heard that. And then you ask them, well, can we change it? I don't know. But the answer is yes, you can change it. Because now with our system too, it's not like it's a paper format. People would come and take this paper registration process that they had for a conference, for example, and try to convert that to technology, software as a service that's on demand 24 hours a day on your phone. It doesn't work. It's too complex for members. It's easy to see on a piece of paper, I check this box, I check that box, but turning that into software and a process is just very complex. And it doesn't need to be that complex. And most groups will agree if they sit down and look at it, you're right, it doesn't need to be that complex. The end result is I get somebody registered for the conference and they attend. A lot of easier ways to do that. Dues processes, reporting I talked about. I mean, we really want to start cranking out a bunch of reports, but the more specific we can get around certain industries, the better we can help. Continuing education, we're working on platforms that can be shared and networked together. Again, automation. So here's now continuing the discussion from the data, okay, around communities. I know everybody's interested in trying to figure out how they're going to enter the community market, right? How many of you do have Facebook and LinkedIn pages? And are you using them frequently? Are you monitoring them? Are you placing the content on them? And because LinkedIn still, even the groups we see on LinkedIn, they still seem to be around employment, right? They're around finding a job or finding an employer to work for or stealing an employee from another company that you want to hire. Facebook still tends to be not as professional as an industry discussion group could be.
Facebook wasn't designed for that.
It wasn't, you're right.
It was designed for college students to share pictures with their friends.
You're exactly right. I mean, you're right. I mean, that's exactly what it's for, and they're trying to convert it to something it's not, and it doesn't. So again, we I think we're lucky enough to kind of stop ourselves in our tracks years ago and say, this is not what they need. They don't even need a separate. I mentioned all those platforms just a little bit ago, Higher Logics and all those, and I don't think that works. We don't think that will work because it's a whole separate platform for the networking component, but all the media is over on your website, and it's different. It's like. We think the media, when there's an article on your website, it has to have the ability to communicate and collaborate right next to that article. If there's an education course, right next to it has to have the ability to share and rate and review and all the types of things people do. We think within Members 360, their profile needs to be their single professional profile for the rest of their life, if they're in your state. I mean, from the time they're a student and they decide to be a pharmacist or a physical therapist or a nurse to the time they retire as one. A single profile is our model going forward. But the point is, we look at communities as you have your main group. Yeah, go ahead, Raphael.
Something that we would appreciate help with, I guess you might be able to help all associations, is at a later date you can follow up with a white paper on how we might be able to get our members to update their profile.
That is a problem, yeah.
That is a problem.
See,
But
even if we know how to operate it, they won't.
But why do you think they don't update their profiles?
They don't
Because
really have. There's no
lazy?
perceived value in doing so. Yeah.
I mean, that's it. I mean, pure and simple. If I'm connected to something and I'm afraid I'm going to miss out on something, I'm going to update my profile. On other things, I don't update my profile either because it's about me, not about what they want to provide me. And that's the attitude you have to change. I mean, it goes back to what we were talking about before, is marketing. Marketing is consistent and constant, and you may not get them as fast as you want them, but eventually you'll get them because you'll hit them with something that hits them at the right time, at the right place in their career where they're interested in it. I use LinkedIn as an example. A year ago, how many were at a conference a year ago in here? All right, well, You may not have known it then, but you know about it now. We had a lot of turmoil last year at our conference. Turnover in staff, our VP of engineering. I spent most of my time in my room on LinkedIn. For the first time really in my life, I was up there using LinkedIn the way it was really meant to be used. Trying to network and I spent the first day just connecting with everybody I knew that I'd never connected with because I really never cared about it. So I connected to probably a couple hundred people, and as I kept sending out these in-mails and all these different things, eventually, you know what it did? It said, oops, you've ran out of your free stuff. And you know what I did? Paid. And I didn't even hesitate because I'd already gotten so much value out of it, and I've been paying ever since. And now I know how to use it too because I figured it out. And now when LinkedIn sends me stuff that is related to, because I've completed my profile too. Before my profile didn't have crap on it. I didn't even tell people what I did at Affiniscape. I didn't put a link to my sometimes blog. I didn't put a link to any of that stuff, but now it's there, and it's starting to get activity, and it's starting to suck me in. Right? It's the same thing with members. It's the same with anybody, right? And especially in your professional life. I mean, the more you guys can deliver value, I think you'll find your profiles are going to get up to date. But right now, what's the purpose of them updating their profile? Basically, just so you can send them a bill. It's probably how a lot of them think. And
That's the reason why you hired Austin for that one position.
you mean we just promoted him? You mean?
Yeah.
Well, the industry success manager. I mean, him and Joy both. They're responsible. We kind of split the role into two because the role Austin's in today really wasn't happening because they were overwhelmed with the other part. So we split it into two different roles. So yeah, Austin's role is, while Joy's is all around 360, all around the technology, Austin's is the bigger picture stuff, right? To work with an industry, say, okay, what are the problems? Let's try to figure out other problems, whether it's, again, go back to that first slide I showed you. Our goal is that you guys dominate those 4 areas, 5 years down the road. Not where we're second best or last or the career center is gone and nobody comes to you for careers. We want to own it. And again, every time I say we, I got to clarify so you guys know the page I'm on. It's you. It's your brand. I don't ever care if your members ever hear who Affiniscape is. We don't want them to know who we are. But I also know that with your staff of 3, it can't happen. And I know if I can sit here and sell you software all day long, but in the end, if your members don't find value and you don't deliver relevant content, they don't pay their dues, you don't have money to buy my software, we're both out of business. I mean, I say that in the best the best way possible, because it's just changing fast. And like I said, we fortunately get to see thousands of associations every single day work, and every single day, every month, we have groups that don't renew because they went out of business or they don't have funding. I mean, it's literally a monthly occurrence today. And there's maybe only 1 or 2, but some of them are pretty decent sized organizations that literally you wouldn't think would go out of business. So as a community, this kind of is a good slide of how communities work and who participates. You got your core group, just like you do in your association. You got your core group that participate. But, and like I said in the last session, there's a lot of people out there talking about you and you don't know they're talking about you. So you have to keep that in your conscious mind that they are talking about you. And they're either talking good about you or they're talking bad about you. And you got to try to do as much as you can to get them talking good. So from a community perspective, again, how we view, and you guys probably saw this, this is another one of Neil's components, but moving them from non-member created media, right? This is what you have to start a community. And if you say, we don't have time to create content, we don't have time to create anything on our website to get people to participate, it's going to be very difficult to develop, number 2, 3, 4, and get to the end, which is 5. I think Neil was brilliant when he came up with this cycle, this life cycle. So it's how we're building not just our software, but how we're building the help around how we're going to help these industries. We're going to focus on 1 first, then 2, then 3, then 4, then 5. To us, it's not short term. We're not in this for a year. And this stuff doesn't happen in a year. We've been here 12 years already, and there's still a million things to do, right? And you guys, some of you have been around 100 years, 150 years, right? There's still a lot of things to do. So how do we get them from there to there is by doing the other stuff in the middle, right? By giving them the content that they can start talking about, the content that they view as relevant. And what's great about, again, the newsflash service we just launched, we were so excited to see the direct feedback from pharmacists. Some of it was really negative because some of the articles they didn't like. But to us, when the association called and said, oh, well, yeah, we can't post articles that say Obamacare. That's what one of them did. And of course, there was again, I'm going to take sides, but there was a liberal pharmacist who took offense to the term Obamacare. Well, it's a news article, right? But good news, or good conversation, bad conversation, it sparks conversation. Because I wish we'd had the tools that we're building so they could start talking about it right then, because it would have kept on going. Right? Someone else would have responded, someone else would have responded, and would have kept going. And it's all about talking. It's all about talking under the brand. Today there was a comment, another negative comment back, but you know, they don't unsubscribe. They still keep the thing. But it was a very negative comment about an article around Medicare. But they're responding to us. We don't have anything to say about it. So we've got to get them the tools so we can do that, and we're trying to investigate a few today. But the end is, they want to talk. I mean, that's the best part about it. They want to start talking. So it's a great thing to see that it's actually working already. So around community, taking the concept I talked about before around your data fields and data sets, if you have that same data set, right, so let's say you got association 1, 2, and 3, and now you all have the same data, and we're talking about communities. If we're dealing with bar associations, and I got an attorney 1, 2, and 3 in 3 different states, and they're all family law attorneys, and they're all solo practitioners, right? We now, if those fields are the same, we can when they log into the Minnesota side or the Iowa side or the Texas site, they'll always be seeing, as you see here, they'll always be seeing the right website. They'll be seeing the website that they're part of, the association they're part of. But our system will be able to connect them with all the professionals around the country that they might be interested in participating in a group with or getting to know, right? Because they have the same interests. And these are just 3 very basic examples, but right, the fields are unlimited. The fields could be skill set, it could be all kinds of interests and specialties. There's no limit to what we could put in this on an industry-specific basis. And then, in the end, again, they're able to do all of these things in what we kind of call a community of practice. Right? And it's a national-based community of practice, but it's branded to each state individually. Does that make sense? What do you guys think about that concept?
How is that going to interfere with like nationals organizations? Are we stepping on toes? Are we going to get in trouble with them?
How does that work? How does that work for you?
State chapters. I don't know. I never get to interact with them aside from sending them checks. So.
Well, I'll ask the rest of you guys that question. How do you care about the how do you think about the ABA's?
Well, why could you integrate that into it? That's the other thing.
We potentially
a very strong
could.
association component with them.
We look at it in this sense. We're not going to get in the middle of it. We're building what we know our customers need. And our customers are state and local associations for the most part. And if they're industry specific. Most industries that we work in, bar very few I can think of off the top of my head, have really good relationships with their national organizations. In fact, they compete with them. I've probably been to DC 5 times in the last 4 months, meeting with everyone from the American Nurses, the National Association of Social Workers, the architects, and I talk to them all about the same thing: quit competing with your states. If you keep doing it, the for-profits are just going to take all your business. It may take them 5, 6, 8 years to get the database and get the trust and the loyalty of those people because they're providing valuable services, but it will happen. And while you guys are sitting there beating on each other over credit card processing, or if you're offering different insurance programs or offering different job boards, because you're too greedy to share the money. Just like Tim said yesterday, there's plenty to go around. I told the ANA's COO, I said, your job board, I don't care what it produces today, collectively it could do 10 times as much. But you're so disconnected, you're not selling to those healthcare providers a single valuable set. And like I said earlier in the session, the end result around a job board is to get an employer to say, I don't want to post a job, I don't need to post a job anywhere but my association. If we get them to that point, you got them forever, and you move on to the next one. You try to do the same thing. And over time, you have them all. But not when you give them 10 different choices to go post jobs, because associations are competing. So from a national level, we're going to leave that up to each industry. If they want us to include national, well, we'd love to include nationals. But I've been doing this, like I said, a long time, and I literally have just recently, AIA and NASW are open to talking about it. The National Association of Social Workers I've been talking to for 6 years, they prevent their states from having a job board. We launched one in California, and in 90 days produced over $65,000 in revenue, and got a letter from National, cease and desist letter. So did California. They told them, you can't do this, you can't do this. And you go to the NASW's job board, it had 5 jobs in the state of California. I'm like, what kind of value is that? It's no value at all. So you guys tell us. That was a long answer to a short question, but you can tell I have a little bit of passion about that topic.
I have a question about the privacy policy. If everybody's going to be sharing the same database within that industry, would there be any privacy policy issues?
But it's not they're really shared. You're not going to have access to anybody else's data, just like they won't yours. It's more of a, the data set's at the bottom, but it's in this big database. So any service, so in this case community, but it could be education, it could be anything. If you guys elect to, or if it's a service that's better valued if it's collective versus individual, which this is certainly one of them. Again, the education platform is another. If you can only create 3 or 4 classes a year, there's really not a lot of value in that. But if each state creates 3 or 4, now you have 150 courses. Now there's some value. But the rate and review system, if it's just rated and reviewed by your members versus that course potentially being rated and reviewed by family, solo practitioner, lawyers across the country, there's more value in it. See how we're trying to connect things?
So are you saying that the state can use like how you have the Career Center right now, or whoever puts an ad in the Career Center under the home care industry, everybody gets emailed that information?
Yeah, well today, the job boards are networked, right? So you can go to your site and you can pull up a job in Ohio or Florida that was posted through the Florida Association. But this is taking it to the next level. This is now taking and working with you to determine, so if we're talking to a home care agency and they say, I need a, well, let's say in your case, I need a home care nurse that has 10 years experience that works with pediatrics, that specializes in pediatrics. Today we can't even tell them how many we have, right? But if I could tell that employer, well, you know what, in Minnesota, in the database, we have 220 that match that. But if you want to search Iowa, North Dakota, South Dakota, Wisconsin, try to pull in somebody else, we have 1,240. If you want to do that, it costs you X. If you want to do this, it costs you 10X, right? Whatever it is. But it generates a lot more value for that employer because the end result for us is to get that employer to say, I don't need to go anywhere else. Forget Monster, forget Career Builder, forget everybody. I post it here. I have millions of different choices. I can get right in front of the person I need. Your case is, what we're even doing is going to connect you guys to the PT and the nursing boards, right? Because that's who most of your people hire, right? They hire physical therapists and nurses. Well, they're not going to your site, they're going to Minnesota PT site, right? Who we also have. So we're saying, all right, how do we connect and sell both? The end result is getting the employer the result they want, right? And we're trying to figure out how do we do that best way possible. So again, having all the data like that, we can actually use it in a different way. Does it make sense? Okay. Now, again, collaboration on services, I'll kind of go through this relatively quickly, but these are, well, we just talked about the Career Center. But the networking itself creates value. We know, because we've now been doing this for 6 or 7 years, just on the job board alone, when we start with just one, it's very difficult, especially if it's in a non-healthcare, but really like physical therapy, occupational therapy, it doesn't matter if it's Idaho. There's value in it because there's such a big shortage around the country, physician assistants. But banking's a tough industry. Right? There's not a ton of jobs, so if we launch just Montana bankers, I can't put anybody on that. I can't put a sales rep on that. They make 20, 30 calls, there's just not that many jobs. But if I have Montana and Idaho and Oregon and Washington and California and I have that person on it, now the employers also view it as more valuable. When we first started in home care, we had you guys in Florida. I think that was it. Florida, and you guys were second on the job board. Today we have 12 states. So now when you talk to an agency and you can tell them your job is not just posted in Florida or just posted in Florida and Minnesota, now it's in 12 states. And I think eventually when we can tell them now your job is going to be on 42 different PT association websites and 50 nursing association websites, now it's really valuable, right? So networking creates the value. As we continue to build industries out, we start creating these kinds of sites, and these are really sales tools. So there's no brand here. It says this is a site put together by the pharmacy, or this one was this physical therapy, by the physical therapy associations. It's got all the different components for employers, for job seekers. It tells all the different states participating. This is a great sales tool. And when we can show this to employers, I mean, they like it. Right? I mean, it's about selling value over and above what a Monster can do, or a PTjobs.com can do, or physical therapy jobs, or all therapy jobs. I mean, there's a bunch of them in physical therapy. And our job is to compete with them and try to put them out of business on behalf of our organizations. Nobody knows who Affiniscape is when we call these employers. So the networking is highly valuable. If a job seeker does come through here through a search engine, they click on the state they want to go to and they go to the association's website. Newsflash. How many of you have seen the newsflash? I know some of you are in industries that we're getting ready to talk about. Again, another service that has to be networked or we can't do it because the content alone for pharmacy, so these are the states just as an example, but here's what it looks like. Very professional, topic oriented where you got FDA approvals, drug treatment. Pharmacists love this stuff. They go one place and it tells them this news is less than 2 days old. It comes out on Tuesdays and Thursdays, but the point is we couldn't even launch it until we had 20 because the content alone costs us $2,000 a month. I mean, for pharmacy across the country. So we know not a single state could offer this kind of service. So we told them we got to have 20 to get going, and then we can see if we can sell advertisers. So advertisers are starting to pay for the position. But like I said before, they're asking us questions about the demographics that we know if we could answer, they're willing to pay a lot more for. But one state at a time, we couldn't do it. So all about, again, networking. Continuing education. How many of you have CE as a requirement in your space? Anybody? A couple of you? How many of you do CE? I mean, is it a fairly good business for you? Well, I know your industry we're talking to. I mean, because we had a big meeting with all your EDs.
If the educators in Colorado, the administrators attend our 2 major events every year for whatever their licensing period is, 10 years now, they can earn all of their continuing
For the whole year?
education credits for their requirement.
Yeah, I mean, that's good in your space. In a lot of spaces, where it is required, like a lot of your people, they have 15 to 30 credit hours every single year that they have to attend. They can only take so much online. They have to take so much in person. But the point is, as we've seen, while every association wants to provide CE, and they've asked us, what can you guys do? What other platforms are out there? Again, it comes down to resources and time. And just like I said before, if you don't have, if in the end the member doesn't perceive value because you have 1 or 2 classes in your library or 4 classes and they're put together by video guys like these guys, they're terrible. No, hey guys, hey, you're listening, you're awake, good for you. But having high quality videos makes all the difference in the world. There are some great platforms out there. So again, for almost 3 years, we've been looking at platforms, not brands. Okay, there's a lot of brands out there in every industry. There's brands out there in all healthcare and there's brands in banking, but they're trying to build their own brand. We don't want that. We want groups that will give us the platform that the associations can work on building their brand. But we know one of the key things, first and foremost, is they have to be able to share content seamlessly. So if you guys created a course in Minnesota and said, you know what, we want to elect to share this course, if it was one that could be shared in Florida, that's a good course Minnesota created, we want it in our library. And then a member in Minnesota or a member in Florida takes it, you both get revenue from it. But they're looking at it in Florida and they're viewing it in Florida and they're taking it in Florida, but it was your course that you created.
Are you looking at this as a recording?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of different ways to do it, lots of formats. So it could be video, it could be audio, it could be PowerPoint, it could be live webcasts like what we're doing right here. Texas Bankers, right? You guys probably participate in a lot of the Texas Bankers live webcasts that they do. And they're literally live, and bankers in Montana are viewing it. Texas puts it on and foots all the bill, but your members pay, right? They pay to attend it, and I'm sure you get a little revenue out of that as well for promoting it. It's all about sharing it, right? But in the end,
What's the revenue share then?
who what?
Who does the revenue share? I mean, if it's a revenue share for a course that, let's say, we created, and then since Florida purchases it, like how does that?
It's all built in. It's all built into the platform. There are multiple platforms out there that do it already today. I mean, banking is a good example of an industry that uses a platform that has a great sharing mechanism in the back end. The same, I'm assuming, are you guys on the InReach platform? Monexa? Or you don't have your own banking platform? You just promote Texas's? Well, again, a lot of the smaller states, but they also have all the legal, basically 44 state bars that share content, and it's 10 years old. So there are multiple platforms out there that do that, and they're just behind the scenes promoting
it.
it.
Like they'll go to your website and purchase it straight from you.
If I'm Florida and you're Minnesota, and a Florida member would go into the Florida site, to the Florida library, and purchase a class and watch it and everything under the Florida's brand, but it could be your class
Okay.
that you put up on the library.
They purchased it from Florida, but Florida can purchase it from us that was on, okay, that was on the library.
Yeah, the libraries are connected. I mean, that's the whole point. It's just a networked collaborative system. So in the end, the point is, just like I talked about the job board, the end is that you end up with a single professional source for education, that you own education. Rating reviews by peers are then data driven by that shared and collaborative data set. Because if I can, let's say you have a member and you know who they are, what they need, when they need it, what they like based on the courses, and you can point them directly to something at the right time through an automated system. Right? If you can do that, they're going to take the courses that are rated and reviewed by people that they trust. They're family lawyers that are in solo firms. If they value that, just like I said before about Yelp, if you've ever used Yelp, and you go and you see 15, or TripAdvisor, anybody use TripAdvisor? Right? You go to those sites and you see 20 reviews, and 18 of them are good, but 2 of them are really bad. I mean, you kind of think a little bit about it, but if you know one of those 2 people that said it's really bad, you're probably going to weight yourself clear over to those 2. So it's the same here. If you have rating reviews by attorneys that are rated a 4, well, that's okay. But if I have rating reviews that are 4s or 5s by bankruptcy attorneys, and I'm a bankruptcy attorney, that's even more valuable. But if I actually see a rating review by somebody I know, I'm going to believe that over all of them. So that's the kind of system that the data that I talked about helps actually create. And that's our vision going forward, is connecting the data and making everything data driven to where ultimately if that member gets an email saying, hey Adam, according to our records you have 12 credit hours, you need 15 by January 1st, click here to view our online calendar, or click here to view our live calendar, click here to view our online courses that match your interests and are rated and reviewed by your peers, potentially this guy who's in the same group as you are. There's a lot of different ways to connect it if the data is there, if the data is connectable.
So with this, would you have the option to choose if you want to share within the library or not for that specific event? Okay.
Yeah. The last slide is basically, okay, we got to get from here to here. We got to combine the resources to provide this, or we end up all in the end not very successful. So this is the last slide. I put back to this because this is the key to the whole thing. We're going to be forcing you guys, I see you forced in the best way possible, to start talking to each other. And we'll set up the formats to do it, and we'll have the calls to do it, but we need as much information as you guys can give us. We know this is not going to be easy, but we got to try something different. So thank you guys for attending. Thanks for your invitation.
Make sure I get your evaluation, guys, when you're done with them.
And if you haven't met Joy on the way out, make sure you introduce yourself to Joy.
Hopefully I've been listening to you guys.
And make sure your staff's know Joy.